Hey guys, like, comment, subscribe. We're back again today with lucky guest number 7. And based on his name, I believe he's Irish, so the luck is fitting. We have UFC commentator Brendan Fitzgerald. Let's welcome him here. All right, so as mentioned, we have UFC commentator here, Brendan Fitzgerald. Brendan, thank you for coming, especially on a fight day. Big kudos to that.
Yeah, man, happy to be here with you. Oddly enough, sometimes fight days, I like to take it easy in the morning. You know what I mean? You can't wake up and go 100 miles an hour all day when you got a 6-hour event coming up. So like to do these when I can on a fight day. Happy to be with you.
Awesome. And what does a fight day actually look like for you as a commentator? Like, when do you start? When do you leave? How does that in between go?
Yeah, so it kind of changes as you evolve and find out different ways to prepare and stuff like that. Obviously, it's very different because I live in Las Vegas and all our events are in Las Vegas, but I have to come stay at a hotel on a Friday night. So, you know, I always liked when we were in different cities, I'd like to go for a walk on fight day. I'd like to see the city a little bit, unplug from all of the fight week prep. And then, you leave some time for you to get into it. But it's very different because now instead of, being on the East Coast and then our events would start at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or depending on where you are, now it will start like lunchtime or just after that, 2 o'clock, sometimes 1 o'clock. So it doesn't leave a heck of a lot of time in the morning. And we kind of have to stay on property here. So I'll try to get a workout in, try to read something, do some final prep, look through my files. And it's not too long until you have to head over around noon to the Apex and get ready.
So wait, you're gonna go in about 3 hours and you're just this nonchalant. You're like, I can't even imagine 3 hours, even as a commentator, just being so relaxed before an
Yeah.
event.
But well, if it becomes what you do, if it becomes your job, then imagine like a football player, like before on game day, they wake up and it's just like, okay, their first game they're probably really nervous, but after you played in the NFL for 5 years, it's like you wake up on game day and then the game's coming up. So, once you do it a bunch, like the nerves go away and you just have to be focused on what it takes to have a good show. And the way to do that is to not freak out over it and to not get really nervous over it and wonder what could go wrong. It's just to do what you've done oftentimes before, and here's another one.
Absolutely.
Building upon that, as you just mentioned, a lot. You probably have a lot of jitters in your first time going about it. What was your first time calling an MMA event? Was it with the UFC? And do you remember having those jitters?
Yeah, so the first MMA event I called was Contender Series, and that was, I don't particularly remember that day. I know I was up early because I lived on the East Coast, so I flew out for it. So I was up at like 4 in the morning, and I remember going for a walk on the strip or a jog on the strip, and I don't know, just tried to keep myself busy. I was definitely kind of nervous, but it didn't seem like too much. It was 5 fights. It was like 2 hours. But I do remember in Fresno in December of 2017 when it was my first UFC event, and all of a sudden we're not on the UFC Fight Pass app. We're on Fox Sports 1. I knew it was going to be the biggest broadcast I'd ever done to that point, and I was pretty good that whole week. And then that day, like Mackenzie was saying, like a few hours before the event, yeah, I started freaking out. Like I started realizing how big it was going to be for my career. I started realizing like, oh, how many people are going to be watching, and the length of the broadcast, 6 hours, something I had never done before in a sport that I was still kind of wrapping my head around in terms of, what a commentator should do, how it should sound, like still doing all those sort of things. So yeah, I felt good all day. I was listening to music and just kind of walking around the arena. And then I kind of had like a little bit of a freak out moment, had to like sit in the corner, meditate a little bit, like eyes closed for like 10 minutes. And you just have to understand everything's going to be okay. And then go forward. And like, usually when that happens, once the show starts, you're fine. All the nerves are about the beginning. They're about thinking about it, about the build up. Once the lights come on and your microphone is live and you fall back on your broadcasting experience, then things are all right.
And I mean, you kind of laying out that day too, like you talking about waking up at 4 a.m., 6 hour events, you having to be there in 3 hours basically now. Do you think commentators get the credit they deserve for the work they actually put in?
I don't know. It's one of those things like plenty of times we get too much credit, I feel like. I don't know. It's like I always
Rogan,
yeah.
maybe.
Well, here's the thing, like, yeah, we work hard. Yeah, like we pour ourselves into our work, and it's just like, yeah, but like we love the work. You know, if you don't love the work, then chances are you haven't made it this far. And you probably haven't made it this far if you don't put in the preparation. So you got to kind of like that aspect of it. And you know, I'm one of those, like, if people say nice things about me and my preparation and what they think of the job that I do, then that's great. But if they don't, and they enjoy the UFC broadcast and they're just a big fan of the sport, and I'm not doing anything to mess that up, then that's fine too. You know, if you're in it for the credit, then you like that's where like I don't like that sort of approach. You know, if you're in it for like, oh, I want people to tell me how good I did, then that's something that you're never going to win. You know, you're never going to win that battle if you're really thinking about it that way, because inevitably there's people that think you suck, and then those will drive you. You know, those are the ones you remember even more and drive you nuts. So, you know, it's nice to get credit and compliments and stuff, but you can't like wait for that.
Yeah, definitely. I understand where you're coming from there.
I want to build upon whenever you mentioned that you went to your from the Contender Series on the Fight Pass, and then moving
Yeah.
on to going on to Fox, and then now
Right.
of course ESPN took over the deal, and now you're on the biggest sports network in the United States, probably the biggest sports network in the world.
Yeah.
With that being said, was there what did you feel? Did it feel different whenever you guys moved over to the ESPN network?
Yeah, it was a little different. Like, you know, for me, what was interesting was I worked at ESPN and covering college
Yeah.
sports, and then I got laid off, and then I found this awesome job with the UFC, and then the deal was up, and then ESPN gets the rights back, and there was a time where it was just like, okay, am I still gonna be good going forward as a UFC announcer? And they're like, well, we don't know. We're working out the details on that. And I never had any ill will towards ESPN for the layoff. Like, I understood the business model of it and the fact that they need to change their business because of the media landscape changing. But I would have been really pissed if ESPN laid me off. I went out, I found myself an amazing job, and then ESPN took over the rights, and then they got me out of that. Then I would have been like, what the F? Like, that sucked. But in the end, ultimately, the UFC had their say over the broadcasters, and the same relationship stayed intact, where like I work for the UFC and we're on ESPN, but also like the connections on ESPN, like, you know, the guy who kind of is the connection for the UFC and ESPN has been great to me. And, you know, they know that I worked there, and, you know, they know people that were like, had nothing but good things to say about me and stuff like that. So I guess the difference in scope is like ESPN is just a bigger animal than Fox Sports, you know. Other than Fox Sports, like network major properties of the NFL and the World Series and stuff, like ESPN is where people go for sports. And ESPN Plus is still a new kind of technology and a new platform for people to get used to, but it's doing well. The UFC has never done better in terms of eyeballs on it. I think ESPN has a large part to do with that.
Yeah, and one thing with ESPN, they also have an award show called the ESPYs, and on your podcast, you actually had your own little award show with the Fitzy Awards, and I
Yeah.
believe you had given Fighter of the Year to Kevin Holland. What is it about Kevin that's really standing out to you, and why did you pick him specifically?
Well, so what I do is, this is kind of funny how it started out. I just was on social media thinking about the year that I had. I think this was back in 2018, the end of 2018. I had never had a job like I had with the UFC, where I'm traveling around to all these different cities, like both in the US and North America, and then like South America, Europe. Like it's pretty crazy, the global travel that you get to do. And as a result, you get to see a bunch of different stuff. You get to eat at a bunch of different restaurants, like talk to different people, and you know, you just find yourself in different parts of the world. Like, I would have never thought I would go to New Zealand to cover a sport, you know. And now that's part of the job when we get travel back. And so at the end of 2018, I was just like, oh, let me just like think back on the moments that we've had this year. And then with my podcast, I was like, well, let me just make a podcast episode where I talk about it all. And with the fighter parts of those awards are like things that have to do with me. So, you know, if you were to pick fighter of the year, now Kevin Holland happened to, you know, win fighter of the year on a lot because he went 5-0, but I called like 3 of those fights. So for instance, the year before, I picked the fighter of the year as the Korean Zombie because I called 2 of his fights. Both were a main event. He won both by knockout in the first round. One of them was in Korea. So it's like that stood out to me as like he was the guy that gave me the moments that I'll remember that year in terms of my broadcasting. So for Kevin Holland to call 3 of those 5 fights, have them be finishes, bonus winning performances, kind of be a breakout star, it's like, yeah, that would be the fighter of the year for me in terms of events that I called.
And were you calling the Jacare fight, remind me?
No, I didn't call the Jacare fight. I called him, he beat Charlie Ontiveros in the first round. Man, it's so tough at the Apex. They all blend together. But he had 2 other, he beat Joaquin Buckley, 3rd round knockout. And he had 1 more. And I can't remember it off the top of my head. But yeah, he's had quite a year.
Yeah, and the Jacare knockout, I mainly bring it up because that was obviously a pretty devastating one. What do you think alive is the worst knockout you've ever seen? And how does it translate in terms of TV to live, in terms of, I guess, the effect that some people miss and actually understanding how bad some knockouts could be?
Oh, yeah. Well, Corey Sandhagen and Frankie Edgar, I mean, I just did that one a few weeks ago. And it's just crazy. It's tough because honestly, like when I'm calling a fight and the fight's happening up here, I'm looking right here at my computer screen, like I am with you guys. Like I'm looking at the monitor because if you look live, sometimes you can glance up and see it, but all of a sudden, like for instance tonight, Curtis Blaydes and Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis and Curtis Blaydes are going at it like this, and I'm looking up at it. That's fine. If they're looking at it like this and Derrick Lewis is here, I can't see what Curtis Blaydes is doing. I'm blocked out by Derrick Lewis. So, a lot of times on the monitor on TV, they don't want you to miss anything either. So they'll switch the camera angle. So you're looking on a screen more often than not. I guess the thing with a live knockout is when you see a really bad one, a really vicious one, high impact, not only do you see it on the screen like everybody else does and have that reaction, but then I can look up and then I can see it in real time. I can see the fighter that got the knockout. I could see the fighter that got knocked out that's on, that's struggling or whatever on the ground. And so, you hope for the best. Like it is, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. Luckily, like they get up, they're fine, and on they go. And that's the sport. They know that going in. We know that going in. And, it's as real as it gets. It's quite a thing to witness in person.
It sounds like it's crazy. I can only imagine, especially right now with the no fans in the audience.
Yeah. That kind of makes it tougher because then there's like 50 people in the room, let's say, right? The commission, the judges, and whatever. But there's no fans. If you get a big knockout, like when Masvidal knocked out Ben Askren, the arena's going nuts. Everybody's cheering, and then there is concern for the fighter, but without the crowd at the Apex to support the big knockout and celebrate it, what you get mostly in that room is people concerned for the fighter that's down, and you have to, on TV, remember to celebrate the knockout of the person that just scored it. And so that's definitely a big difference. And I have the crowd there to support that big knockout and provide the energy so that you can really pay homage to like what you just saw,
Yeah, and maybe before we get into some Blaydes and Lewis content, one thing you said there was kind of about one of the questions I was going to ask, where how do you draw the line between celebrating the knockout but still actually considering the person who is on the other end of it, like from a professional standpoint?
Yeah, I think you just have to be respectful to the fact that they have family and friends watching, but ultimately it should be about the fighter that got the knockout. You know what I mean? Corey Sandhagen, like that was incredible. Like he timed it, whatever. You celebrate the knockout. You don't, it's almost, to me, it's almost worse if you were to like, oh man, if you're really to express concern, because in that moment, I'm not doing anything about it. There's
Right.
nothing that I can do that makes it better for anybody. My job is to describe the action, call it as I see it, and then, really kind of celebrate the fighter that scored a big moment, while keeping it respectful. You know what I mean? You don't want to be like, oh man, I can't, it's not for me to judge on that, especially not being a fighter, what they should or shouldn't have done or what should have happened. But I just think you got to stay in the positive mode of celebrating the big moment and the accomplishment for the fighter that wins.
Absolutely.
And building upon whenever you mentioned the Blaydes fight later tonight, of course, I'm not sure if you heard about his comments a couple days ago, essentially saying to Dana, why do you bash your fighters like him that win, but win in a different way where they take a little bit less damage? Do you see that as fighters like him don't end up getting the opportunities at some other ones that are just going for the knockout every single round, where he's playing the long game? Do you think that they kind of get held back a little bit?
I mean, it's very different. If you're a sports fan, hockey, for instance,
Yep.
If the NHL, it's kind of weird. It's, NFL, same thing. Like, they have their as marketable teams and entities and cities and whatever. Like, if you're, the NFL commissioner and the Jacksonville Jaguars have a great defense and they make the Super Bowl, okay, you're not going to be as thrilled about it as if you have Patrick Mahomes taking on Tom Brady. Like, that's made for TV stuff. The fight game, the thing is about it, there's no playoffs. There's no proper thing. There's always guys getting injured. There's always guys that have a hot streak. There's fights that need to be made. There's pay-per-view cards that need to have championships on the line. It's a business of opportunity. And it's not as simple as just like, I've won all of these, so I get a title shot. There's no rules about that. And for better or worse, like, okay, like if you wanted the rules about it, then there's other organizations you can go to that do have tournaments and brackets and predetermined rules like that. But the UFC is not one of them. We're a prize fighting promotion. So with Curtis Blaydes, like, I don't fault him for being like, you're giving me a big win bonus. It's a 6-figure win bonus. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. That's the most important thing for me. But, understand that, okay, like, if I didn't fight that way, maybe it's like bigger risk, but there's also a bigger reward if you become the UFC heavyweight champion because you're a crowd-pleasing fighting style and they're going to give you that shot. And oftentimes too, like, they might give a fighter like that a shot more than once. They'll build the case that that's what people want to see. And it's on the fighters to attack it the way they want to for their career. There's plenty of fighters out there that they win and nobody seems to remember how they win because they go to a decision all the time, but they win. So good. You get your win bonus and you're climbing up the ladder slowly. And then there's others like Conor McGregor who wins like 9 times in the first round after he talks a bunch of trash. And it's just like, cool, he backed it up. So guess what? He became $100 million man. It's not like that cut and dry and that simple all the time, but there's big reward if you're going to lay it on the line and then it does go in your favor. And if it doesn't, they'll give you more chances if you're a fun fighter to watch.
Yeah, we won't ask directly for your pick, but I'll ask in other words, I guess, who do you think needs a win, or what does a win do more for between Blaydes and Lewis tonight?
Well, with like the heavyweight division's in an interesting spot because there's it's busy at the top. It's almost busier than usual. Like, we just had Volkov and Overeem. Now we have this main event 2 weeks later. Cyril Gane and Jair Rozenstruik are going at it next week, and then Stipe and Francis Ngannou are set for the rematch already. So, and then John Jones is waiting in the wings. So I think anybody kind of understands that Ngannou and Stipe, whoever wins that fight. Now, if Ngannou wins, it sets up a trilogy, and if Stipe wins, it sets up John Jones. I mean, I think that's what we're looking at. And Curtis Blaydes even said so as much too. He's just like, I don't know, I understand it. So I think if he wins, he's still going to have to sit out and wait for the title shot, or he's probably going to have to win one more. Probably beat the winner of next week. Rozenstruik's like 4, I think, and Gane is like 7. And you know, for Blaydes, it's just like, okay, he could stay busy and make some more money, or he can sit out and try to wait for that title shot. For Derrick Lewis, he's like, he's an interesting personality. He's a crowd pleasing guy. It's funny because like he doesn't, you know, he'll say, "Oh, I want the title," and whatever. He doesn't care. Like he just wants to fight. He wants to keep fighting. He makes a good living. Oftentimes he's scoring a knockout. You know, he's on the right side of the knockout instead of the wrong side. So, you know, it's kind of funny. Like there are high stakes because I think Curtis Blaydes probably has more to lose, because if he loses now, he's down 4 or 5, and he's got to probably win 2 or 3 fights to get to a title instead of just one more. So yeah.
Lewis as being one of those guys that you're mentioning before, that they lay it out on the line, that they give it all their best every single round to be able to make sure they go for that knockout.
Absolutely. I mean, he's got the most knockouts in the UFC heavyweight division. So, I mean, you know, there's funny angles of it. Like if you ask Derrick Lewis if you're a mixed martial artist, he'd probably tell you no. And he says, I'm a brawler. Like he wants to brawl. You know, if you're going to try to wrestle him, like he'll spend as much time on the ground as he needs to try to survive, and ultimately he wants to get back on the feet so he can knock you out, like he did against Volkov, like he did against Marcin Tybura a few years ago. Spent most of that fight on the ground, but his power carries late into the fight, so he's always got a puncher's chance.
Yeah, and I know we had mentioned earlier about Kevin Holland. I'm sure he's one of your favorite fighters. But in terms of, I guess, fighters you actually have relationships with, how different is it commentating for your friends versus just a random fighter coming in?
Yeah, when the fight starts, you just got to call it like you see it. I mean, I called Paul Felder's fight against Rafael dos Anjos, and that was, you know, that's the strongest connection that I've had, because you know, me and him started on the Contender Series together. Like we built this friendship and traveled around and gone out to dinners and all this fun stuff. And I was at his fight in Auckland when he fought Dan Hooker, and that was almost tougher to like work that weekend but not be on the call. I just, you know, was waiting for the post show, you know, because I was doing the pre-show and the post show. And, you know, so you're just waiting for the post show. So it's like, you know, my hands are just sweating for 5 rounds while he's in this fight, and you're trying to score it and you're trying to make a case that he won, and ultimately comes down to a split decision. And, you know, you're just gutted for him. It just sucks. And you just really feel bad in that case. When he fought RDA, you know, the circumstances surrounding it, how he took it on short notice and all that, and he had such a good attitude towards it. But when the fight started, it was a lot like more cut and dry. Like, this is my job. I gotta call the action and, you know, make sure it's not one-sided. And, you know, like I have respect for RDA. I have respect for all the fighters that get in there. So it was actually, I don't know if it was easier than I expected it to be. I didn't think I would have a problem with it, but you know, it was quite normal once I did that. Yeah.
And do you wish that you got to commentate on any of Bisping's fights on that note?
I mean, it would have been cool. I said that, you know, be able to call Bisping knocking out Luke Rockhold, you know, and I don't really know Luke Rockhold, but obviously now I know Bisping. But even before I had the relationship with Bisping that I do, it's just, you know, to know what that moment meant to him, to like win that title after that long, and to have his family there, because it was in Los Angeles where he had lived and moved, and his kids were in the front row, and they were on, like, that's like just a life memory that he's always going to have. And so yeah, I mean, it would have been cool to announce that and stuff like that, and take part in some of Bisping's antics as a main event fighter. But you know, I'm sure there'll be another connection to have come along and get those moments.
And of course, Bisping is one of the most legendary fighters in UFC history, and you also commentated the Silva's last fight, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Did that feel any different, knowing that it was going to be his last fight in the UFC and everything that came about from Anderson Silva's career?
That was a cool night because of the way that we built it up throughout the night. You know, how long of a career he'd had. Now, the thing with me is, like, I started working for the UFC in 2017, and before that I was, you know, covering a bunch of different sports and all that other stuff. So it wasn't like I had been there since the beginning, you know, and watched all of his greatness front row and all this other stuff, and then was there for the last one. It was more like trying to put into context, you know, what it meant that what he has meant to the UFC. And I think our production team did a great job of throughout the night building him up as looking back on his career, looking back on all the great moments he had and how good he was, and then kind of celebrating it on his way out, win or lose. And ultimately it was a loss. And, fighters that go, he's an older guy. He's like 40, what was he, 43 or 45 when he stopped. So, as you'd expect, like, okay, the results haven't been there over the past several years for Anderson Silva. It was kind of clear that it was time. But I think the relationship, too, that Uriah Hall held him in such high regard, as so many fighters do, into, like, the challenge of knocking him out. The challenge that Uriah Hall had to be the one to, like, knock him out to get his own win, and then have that be Anderson Silva's end of his career, and the emotion that was shown. That was just that was a memorable night for sure.
Building upon that, whenever you mentioned that earlier, that certain guys that are exciting keep getting opportunities, people like McGregor, and Silva would be another prime example of that. With his record, his last fights, he probably shouldn't have been fighting in the UFC, let alone fighting top 10 guys. Do you feel as though a lot of these former vets, and because the UFC is really all about prize fighting, still end up getting these big, huge opportunities no matter what their record is?
Well, you build equity, you earn it. It's not like you're just going to be an exciting fighter that's 0-7 in the UFC and, keep getting those. You're not around that long. So, but like, guys like Anderson Silva, Cowboy Cerrone, like whatever, it's like you look at, are the rules different? Like maybe a little bit, but like the reason why the UFC is as big as it is and why it has as many fans as it does is because of those guys. For all that Dana White and the UFC team and everything that everybody supporting the machine has done, nobody has stepped in there and actually fought. And so to the fighters that do that, they are the ultimate reason why the sport has become what it has. And so then when you're talking about the legendary names like the Anderson Silva and Cowboy Cerrone, people, there's a lot of fighters now that are like, oh yeah, I was going to play college basketball, but I saw Anderson Silva fight in the UFC and I was just like, no, I want to do that. And now they're in the UFC. Like, you got to respect that and you got to honor that. And I think that, because they were that figure, then, they've earned it.
Yeah, and we don't want to take too much of your time here. We'll just wrap up with a couple more questions.
Sure.
But we can't let you go without bringing up Mexico City. So tell us, what happened there? Was the hiding under the desk fight or flight, or was that protecting the suit?
It was more protecting the suit. No, I mean, I just didn't feel, I don't know. Like, I don't have to pay for the dry cleaning on that, but like, it was more just like I had to keep announcing, right? There was no break. We weren't going to go to a commercial. And I didn't feel like getting a beer, or whatever was going to come hurtling down. I didn't feel like trying to be on the air and stay composed while getting splashed with beer. So I thought the thing that I can do here is sit down in a guarded area and just kind of hang out and be able to talk through it very, very matter-of-factly, which is something that I did. And I think there's plenty of people that respected the move. And, the other thing is, too, like, you got, 12,000 drunk people that are pissed off because the main event just got called off. Like, they might throw something that's a little more dangerous than a beer. They got phones in their pocket. They got whatever, and, you just see a bunch of crappy stuff happen at sporting events, like fans that'll get in fights outside of a Jets-Patriots game and stuff like that. It's just like, why even mess with that type of thing that's happening if you don't have to? And so, it was a little bit of both, but ultimately, like, I just wanted to stay composed. I knew we were not going to go to commercial, so I thought the best way was to protect myself on three sides and see what was coming at me.
And do you think it was great for the fans to maybe see like the complete opposite, where you have Michael sitting there with his phone filming it for Instagram Live, and then you said, you take just the professional route from it?
It was funny. Like, if he never puts me on Instagram stories, then I don't think it ever gets out, honestly, because that's how it kind of ultimately breaks. But it's funny. Like, I thought it was funny the whole time. It's funny that he was shadow boxing That was especially funny because you can't shadow box like 12 beer bottles coming at you. And I think it shows the natural, like the truth of who we are, right? Like my first instinct is to just be like, cool, let's keep it safe. Gonna get home to my family tomorrow. Gonna not take any damage or whatever. And Bisping's natural of just like, oh, you guys gonna go? Let's go. Let's go. I'm here for it. And the truth comes out when the chips are down. So that was funny.
Well, it's a good thing he was able to capture it, because that moment became memorialized that year as one of the top moments of fighting.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. I always tell people, it's like, I hope I don't end my career that's my biggest moment, but to this point, it probably is. And I don't think there's no harm done, right? It's just a funny thing. UFC commentator goes under the desk and whatever. So it's a good thing I can laugh at myself in that regard, because plenty of other people were.
And I had seen you post as well about like eating chips by the octagon. Like, is there some rule against that or something, or is that just you joking around?
So the eating chips thing was in Jacksonville, right? So in Brasilia, that was the first event without fans, but then the sports world shuts down and we were the first sport that came back. And so in a big empty arena, it was very strange, I think, on TV for people to kind of take in this new reality of like, when basketball does come back, when hockey does come back, and now that we were back, like this is the new reality for the foreseeable future of no fans and no noise, no crowd noise and stuff. And I just remember the Family Guy clip of like Peter being in the attic.
The Anne Frank one, yeah.
And so like when I had like a bag of chips and I'm sitting there waiting to do the post show, that's like how I felt. So I just put that on Instagram, because it's hilarious. Just like, it's all quiet. There's just like some coaches yelling whatever, and then I'm just like, and when you're eating chips, they're way louder in your head than they are to anybody else around. But yeah.
No, that's a great reference.
Yeah.
And one last thing I also seen on the Halloween event, you posted that peppermint patties, the York peppermint patties, was your favorite Halloween candy. Is that accurate? Really?
Have you ever had one?
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately,
they're not bad.
Old age. They're good, man. All that other stuff is like, I mean, I know York peppermint patties are probably filled with a bunch of fake sugar and all that stuff, but they just seem a little bit less. Now, listen, it wasn't always that. It's Reese's peanut butter cups.
That's
all
a good
through
one.
My childhood, and Snickers and whatever. But I just feel like those are starting to blend together as all tasting the same, and they taste a little bit fake, and it's like whatever. But man, when you just get that hit of mint with a little bit of chocolate, man, maybe it's my old age, but to me, it's the easiest candy to just kind of eat and not have it ruin your day. I feel like if you have a Snickers, you're just like, screw it, I'm going to eat whatever I want today. But you can kind of convince yourself that a York is like a breath mint at the same time.
We're going to see Brendan just popping them for breakfast now.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take down a few of those, but I didn't think it was a troll job. People are just like, oh, you're just trolling, aren't you? I actually thought it was funny, the reaction that it got. But what's funny too is a few years ago when we were handing out Halloween candy, and like the kids in my neighborhood, this was like when we lived in a different spot, but the kids in my neighborhood were like going through the thing to pick out all the Yorks. And I was surprised. I was like, what is this? I was just like, I'm surprised. I never wanted a York when I was a kid. I was like, maybe it's the cool candy now, but then, you give it more of a chance. Like that's my new jam on Halloween.
Don't lie, Brendan. You were mad. You were saving those for later. The kids started taking it.
Now I would be. A few years ago, I hadn't come around yet, but now I just be like, oh man, they're taking all my Yorks. So don't you guys take the bad stuff like the Skittles?
And before we let you go here, just kind of a fun question as well. If you were a UFC fighter, what would your nickname be?
Oh yeah, I answered this recently. So. Yeah, I think I have to settle on the Ocean.
Why is that?
It is cheesy. So the Ocean, I love the beach, right? I love the beach. I'm from Cape Cod, and then my wife's from Hawaii and lived right on the beach. So just always a beach guy, whatever. And you know the phrase they say, never turn your back on the ocean, right? So, the waves might crash you down. It's just a phrase. So when I started doing jiu-jitsu, I was just like, oh man, well, the one thing you don't want to do is turn your back, right? You don't want to give your back. So if you were, I was in this, I wasn't thinking of this specifically for me. I was just like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a fighter, right? That specialty was the rear naked choke, as many jiu-jitsu guys are. And it's like, don't turn your back on the ocean. They'll end it quick. And, also the ocean. I mean, we're dominated by the ocean. It covers like 75% of the planet. Water is the strongest life force known to man. And also, The Ocean by Led Zeppelin would be a badass walkout song. So you got it all angles. You got the walkout song, The Ocean, the nickname of the ocean, don't turn your back on the ocean. There's all this like stuff that you can market off of it. And then also like think of the cool features that you could have, right? Like, Amanda Nunes is the lioness. So like you can come up with cool lion style stuff for her feature, King of the Jungle, whatever. Well, think if you're the ocean, man. Like if you got big waves as like the feature, or like you're walking out of the ocean dry because, you do the reverse walk with the editing and stuff like that. I mean, you come up with all sorts of cool shit based on the ocean. And so that's what I'll go with.
You don't like stuff, people are going to joke the ocean's salty. Good times.
There you go. Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, there's so much that you could do with it from a marketing standpoint. It's not bad.
You're in a position right now where you could theoretically nickname somebody out there and it could stick to thousands of people.
The ocean, I could.
The next jiu-jitsu guy.
It would have to be a jiu-jitsu rear naked choke guy. And just hey, call him the ocean because you don't want to turn your back on him. Yeah, I could do that. Maybe if there's like an up and coming fighter that doesn't have a nickname, I'll suggest it and see where they run with it. But then it would be taken away from me, and maybe when I get back to training jiu-jitsu, who knows? I mean, maybe I'll just be like this 50-year-old guy that enters into old guy tournaments, and I can call myself the ocean then.
We're going to get it to stick for you. Don't worry. But we know you have to go. We've taken about 40 minutes from you. We definitely appreciate it. We'll be watching tonight. So we'll obviously be looking for you out there. Thank you again for coming on tonight. And we wish you well, obviously, in the future. Stay safe with the UFC. And we hope to see you there for a long time.
Mackenzie, Alex, great to meet you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you again, Brandon. Have a good one.